This is the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast, where divorce coach Corey Shapiro helps you get creative and not reactive in your divorce. Tune in now and get the support you need to make it through this difficult time. Here's Corey Shapiro.
Welcome to the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast. This is Corey Shapiro. If you're a new listener, I'm a divorce attorney in New York City. I do this podcast to help people get divorced without losing their mind. I do this coaching, and the coaching is really reinforcement, because there's going to be times that you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be anxious, things aren't going to go your way every day. And this is just reinforces that you're not alone. And there's waves to divorce. So I hope you can take time out. I appreciate you listening to the information here, just so we can pause and reflect and touch into our better selves. I think all of us have the answers. So almost like there's always a clear day, right? There's always a clear day. If you go high enough, those clouds will block it. But when you fly above those clouds, and that's where I want us to be when we make decisions. I want us to think long terms above the clouds. That's the goal of this podcast. So again, thank you for joining. All right, here's what we normally do. We do a quote, we do a question, we do divorce news, and then we end with a positive perspective of divorce quote. I don't necessarily know who did this divorce quote, but I saw a wonderful show this week, and it's called Shocked. And if you like corny shows in the best possible way, corny jokes, I recommend this show fully. I'll give you an example of a corny joke. Okay, so if you like this joke, you'll love this show. If you don't like this joke, don't go to this show. Where was the Independence Proclamation signed? At the bottom. So if you like that type of joke, you're going to love the show. Again, if you don't like it, move on, see something else. There's a lot out there. Here's the quote. And I hope I got it right. I couldn't find the book. Robert Horn did the book. Amazing. He won, I believe, a Tony for Tootsie, and he was nominated for this show as well. Here's the quote. Marriage is like a tornado. In the beginning, there's a lot of shaking and banging. Then you lose your house. So that's Robert Horn giving us his magic. What a creative genius that guy is. All right, so let's move on to the divorce question. And if you have a question for the podcast, you could go to question.gettingdivorced.org, and I may answer your question on a future episode. This week's question's from Carrie. Carrie asks, my spouse and I are working on a divorce. My soon-to-be ex and I both agree to waive child support. But he makes a lot more than me, and he is concerned the court will order child support even though I'm waiving it. He's also going to give me a lump sum amount, but he does not want to pay it if the court orders child support. What do you suggest? Well, first of all, Carrie, I appreciate you resolving your divorce, being amicable. And in these collaborative type of situations, people are creative, like you and your soon-to-be ex. And sometimes the issue is not necessarily between the parties, but massaging these agreements so a court will sign off on it. So I appreciate you thinking about this. And I think your soon-to-be ex has a point, has a real point. I want to make sure that this deal is accepted by the court, not rejected, right? So here's what I would suggest you think about. We're going to be talking about severability clauses and non-severability clauses. I know that's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, but let's just understand what this concept means so we can do a good agreement for you two. A severability clause allows a court to carve out a provision that they find doesn't follow public policy, is illegal, just out there. They're not going to do it. But then it lets the court to enforce every other part of the agreement. Now, that doesn't necessarily work in your case, because if that bargain for provision, maybe that lump sum or waiver of child support in your situation, is not enforced by the court, but he pays you all that other money, he's going to be upset. So what you want to do is have a non-severable agreement, a non-severability clause. And what that does is, if the court looks at this agreement and says, you know what, I'm not going to agree to I'm not signing off on an agreement that waives child support. These children are too young. I don't know how younger children are. Sometimes the court thinks this way. I'm going to just reject it. But if there's a non-severability clause, they have to reject the whole agreement. They can't just carve out that one provision. And that will give you and your soon-to-be ex protection, certainty, that if it is rejected by the court, you just start over and try to do something else. I will say, as an aside, as a practical matter, I think 95% of the time, courts accept if parties are okay, if the lawyers or everyone's okay, 95% of the time, it's going to get through. But it could happen. So I think, Carrie, this is something to think about. I think you want to really put forth a non-severability clause, so you don't have any surprises in the divorce. All right. Speaking about surprises, I want to give an example in divorce news, a little bit more about this severability clause and what can happen if it really goes a distance. This facts I'm taking from a case that went all the way up to the appellate division. Let me explain when I say that so people understand. We're not talking the trial, which could be years and so costly. We're talking they did a trial. The trial went against them, and then they had to take an appeal. That's like another year or two, much more money, much more budget. So they fought it out. This is almost like that 1% of the case. So you can understand, if you're thinking about these severability clauses, how courts look at it in the worst case scenario. And hopefully you won't have anything like this. All right, so here's a story. It's a story about love. It's a story about business. It's a story about divorce. And the love part is they got married in 2007, but they separated 1 year later, 2008. That's like a foreshadow. It's only 1 year, short marriage. So the court can, will look at that. All right. So they got married 1 year, and they had a business together. And the wife, she sold her interest in the business to her husband. And I think it was valued at like $60,000. He had to give her $30,000. He couldn't come up with the money, so he paid over time. Not unusual. I think the time was 5 years. Also in the agreement, they discussed that the husband's going to do something with the immigration and the wife's going to cooperate. So that's another thing they put in the agreement. I'm not sure why it necessarily needed to be in the agreement, but it was there. And then as things happen, a few years go by, the husband doesn't pay the amount that is owed. So about 4 years go by. The wife's like, give me my money. He's not giving it. She's forced to court. She seeks a divorce and seeks a money judgment for the money that he owes her. Okay. Now, he's not disputing that husband's not disputing that he owes the money. But again, this is when the court gets involved. Sometimes they do things differently. All the wife wants is what she bargained for. She wants that money. That's it. Pretty simple case, it seems. But the judge was a little creative, a little active. Some will say problematic, and wouldn't enforce the agreement. Wouldn't give that wife the money. Why? Why would a court do this? Can't you give that woman the money? Well, I'm not going to do it, is what the judge is saying, because this is an illegal contract. Because what the court believed is that it was a mutual plot to gain legal immigration status, and it was basically a sham marriage. They've only been married for a year. They got separated. I'm not going to enforce these agreements between these two people who are trying to, get one over on immigration status. That's what the court believed. Shocked was the wife's response. Shocked. So she appealed it. The appellate court thankfully supported her. said, even if the lower court is right, even if that trial court's right, that maybe there was some type of sham marriage, we don't care. I mean, that to me is just wisdom. Why do we not care, appellate division? Well, we don't care because the main part of the agreement was the $30,000. And if the court really has such a problem with that one provision about helping with the immigration status, that's the severability clause. Just you can just void that one provision, but then you can enforce the money. That's what she wants. That's what she needs. We're giving it to her. So it was reversed, sent back to the trial court, and give that woman the money. So that's how these things work. Sometimes you want the severability clause, like in this case, because maybe there was something going on with the immigration, but that's not the main part of the agreement. We want to enforce the money. I need my $30,000. Sometimes, like in the question, you want the deal. It's either 100% of the deal or no deal. And that's when you want a non-severability clause. So I hope this clarifies a point that does come up. It does come up. All right. We like to move to the positive perspective. We like to end with a positive perspective. And here's the positive perspective. We are accepting in a divorce, there's going to be tornadoes. Like in that great, funny quote, there's going to be a tornado. But we don't have to act crazy. We need to protect ourselves when there's a tornado. And we can protect ourselves when there's crazy time, when there's a tornado, when we're trying to make a deal, like we're trying to be creative, where we want the deal to be enforced 100% or nothing. We do that with non-severability clauses. So that's our positive perspective. There's going to be a tornado. It's going to be crazy town. But if we want our deal to enforce, we need a severability provision. Our quote from Robert Horn, a talented artist. Please go see the show if you enjoy cozy, corny shows. Our question was about making sure a deal is massaged to the court when both people agree to it. The divorce news was showing you how a trial court where two people agree on an issue still may have problems with it. And our positive perspective is the realization that when we are in a divorce, we're in a tornado and we have to protect ourselves. And one way to do that, one way, is through non-severability clause. All right, next week, we are going to answer a question about trial preparation. Ooh, trial preparation. That's the show. That's the Super Bowl in a divorce. And talk about a tornado. It's like a tornado or hurricane and everything else you can imagine. And I'll tell you what is the problem that I see in my 2 decades of doing this. If you play the odds, the odds are cases settle. What is it? 10% of cases go to trial. So what most people do is they don't invest the energy, the time, the money to prepare properly. Most people try to have shortcuts because why should you invest money? Things are just going to settle anyway on the first day of trial. We don't have to do so much work. I understand it. But here's the problem. If you want to have a good settlement, you have to come in prepared. And to be properly prepared for trial, I will say, don't hold me to this. This is not this is not a law. It's just a principle. I would say at least 90 days. Yeah, 90 days. That's 3 months. What most people do, I would say a week or two. They go, and you know what's like that week or two? It reminds me of cramming for a test in college or high school. It's just not the proper way. You're not going to bring your best self. If you do things methodically over a long period of time, you're going to come into that trial as prepared as you can be, which will influence, I think, in most cases, a better settlement if things can't settle, because you just be super prepared. And that's what you want to be. You want to be over prepared. All right. That's what's coming up next week. If you cannot wait If you cannot wait and you want more reinforcement, we have a whole archive of shows. You can go to our show's website at www.gettingdivorced.org and check it out. Also, if you have feedback for the show, you've been listening to it, and you want to give me a piece of your mind, maybe because you're losing your mind, send us feedback at gettingdivorced.org. This is Corey Shapiro, your friendly divorce coach. I'm here to remind you to be creative, not reactive.
Thank you for tuning in to the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast with divorce coach Corey Shapiro. Divorce can be a difficult and overwhelming process, but it doesn't have to be. Corey's book is here to help you gain clarity, composure, and a strategic mindset. Get it now as an ebook on Amazon or an audiobook on Audible, and unlock the power of these resources to make more informed decisions and gain a better understanding of the process.
This podcast offers general information only. It cannot replace legal advice. If you need tailored advice, contact an attorney licensed to practice in your area.